As Muslims, we have ethics of war. For us, these are non-options. They're never options to eviscerate or annihilate. It's interesting that these are the people who quiz us on these kinds of moralities. So why do you guys believe in killing and terrorism and so on? But you're the ones who are making a crass utilitarian judgment and justifying or proposing, or people are saying it within your quarters, annihilating an entire population, babies, women, children, animals, whatever you like. This kind of thing needs to be exposed now.
Recently, you were on Piers Morgan's show, subhanAllah, and I think not only was it well received by the Muslims, but by the greater audience who watched it. I went through the comments. I don't think I saw a negative comment about you, subhanAllah. A lot speaking about Piers and how he conducted himself and how he kind of refused to actually engage in some of the points that you were making. So what was your experience like?
I knew Piers Morgan's style. I watched his videos before. Obviously, he's a big figure in the United Kingdom, and I saw that his temperament was that he had a pretty hostile, interrogative approach.
Yeah.
But I also saw his weaknesses, which is that he had heavy fists but glass jaw. And I saw that when he stormed off in one of those situations with Meghan, a woman called about the situation in Meghan is the prince's wife, and he stormed off. So I realized that where is he uncomfortable? Where's Piers Morgan uncomfortable? Piers Morgan is, you got to look at the character, and I think I'm quite good at analyzing a person's character, right? Yeah. So I saw Piers Morgan has narcissistic traits, and he is very uncomfortable having to defend himself. So what I did is, where necessary, I put up a few things where I knew he wasn't going to let it go, because he needed to justify himself for reputational purposes. Yeah. And then I kind of buried that in the attack. It's kind of like Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, because Deontay Wilder's a heavy puncher, and so is Piers Morgan. He's a heavy puncher. Yeah. He's finished off a lot of his opponents. He's been in the game for 30 years. He's seen as the Jeremy Paxman of today. Yeah. However, when Deontay Wilder confronted Tyson Fury said, "Look, I realize this guy can't handle the pressure. So instead of punching back, just go forward."
Wow.
And he knocked him out. And so that's what I was effectively going for. With him, you got to see what the person is like. Like, for example, I had a Channel 4 interview with a woman called Darshi. Mm-hmm. And I knew what she was like. Had a conversation with her before. I tried to, if you like, without being inappropriate, charm her. Because I thought she's not going to be disrespectful. She's going to listen to what I have to say. She's not going to interrupt me. She's not going to go for the jugular. No problem, and it was a good interview. But if I tried to do that with Piers Morgan, he would have gone for the jugular. Yeah. And he would have tried to knock me out. Just like Deontay Wilder, he doesn't care. So it's all about assessment. And a lot of these things, as you look at, and I always do these analogies between like debates and fighting, you look at the type of person you're dealing with, and you try and arrange a game plan. And I think with him, that was the right approach. And even the British public knew that, because they knew he was a bit of a bully. So they liked one of the comments, Billy or whatever his name was, I'm sure he wasn't a Muslim person, most probably wasn't, said it's like Piers Morgan saw a mirror in front of him.
Wow.
Because this is what he does to people.
Yeah.
So okay, fine, I'm going to do to you what you do to people.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot and interrogate you.
Yeah. It's an amazing point, because when I watched it, and then my wife watched it, and we were speaking about it, and she's like, I feel like Piers Morgan almost likes Mohammed Hijab in a way, or like at the very least,
I think he admires me. Yeah. Yes, I do think so. Yeah. Because he's I know this is sounding narcissistic myself, and I've got the same problem with Piers Morgan in so many ways, probably. Few exhibitionist traits in my psyche, which I'm trying to erase and expunge from my psycho-spiritual dimension. But Piers Morgan has been on Twitter speaking to me like, he's been. I haven't even had time to sometimes message him back. But the fact this is a mark of someone who's been burnt.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you mean publicly or like in the
publicly?
DM? Yeah.
No. He's like, you can go and check it out. He's been tweeting me and this and that. I thought you said this, and you were lecturing me about that. Of course, this is like right now. Last time I checked, it was 7 million views, bro. Yeah. 7 million views is more than his. He said it himself. This interview garnered more than it did with Cristiano Ronaldo.
Wow.
The Cristiano Ronaldo is the most famous man on the earth, probably. He's a contender. Yeah. His thing was 5 million, 5.1 million.
Wow.
This is 7 million in 4 days. Cristiano Ronaldo's one was a few years old, or a few months old.
Yeah.
So that and the Bassem Youssef one, which got 14 million. Yeah. I feel like we're, for the first time ever, we're actually winning the information war. Yeah. I believe that. Yeah. And I think we're doing it through social media. And I think if you look at the comments, if you look at all the indicators, objectively, statistically, all the media outlets in the world are not being able to silence our voice.
Yeah.
It's a very, very powerful moment for the Muslim people.
100%. I remember I was watching it live, and I felt it was as if I was going on the show. So I was making so much dua, and as soon as you were like, so why'd you introduce me as controversial? I was like, it's a wrap. Alhamdulillah, he's ready. He's gonna crush him, inshallah. And as soon as Piers started defending himself and saying, I was against the Iraq war. Yeah, honestly, with no disrespect to him, you made him look like a child, like complaining to his mom or like defending himself. Like, Mom, I didn't steal the candy. Like that's genuinely how he seemed to my eyes, subhanAllah. So that was crazy. And I think the greater UK audience, like you mentioned, since they're used to seeing him do that to people, when it was done back to him, I think they admired that as well because they like that stuff. But now it's coming from like the opposition. So I think that was pivotal. Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless you immensely. But I do want to talk about something you mentioned, which is the mainstream media and this narrative they've been painting. Like as a young outsider, I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm seeing you discuss it and Sheikh and everyone discuss these things. And then I look at like Joe Biden, what he's saying, Justin Trudeau, what he's saying, the governors and people in the UN and all this stuff and the different information. And I find that when it comes to the Western leaders and when it comes to the Western media, they're all saying the same exact thing without exception. Why is that? Anyone take the mic. Why is that, Sheikh?
I mean, there's always been a confluence between the military-industrial complex and the media, right? So it's almost like a reflex. When the time comes to bang the drum for war, everybody falls in line. We're used to having a superficial difference between Fox News and CNN, right? In the United States, for example, all those differences suddenly melt away, right? When it's time for war and America's last colonial outpost in the Middle East, which is Israel. So, I think that it is tremendously significant, what Mohammed said, that, we have a counter-narrative now, and the counter-narrative is louder and amplified than it's ever been before. Yeah. And I think you see that even in the reaction to Trudeau, who tried to show up for a PR stunt, right, in the masjid the other day, and was heckled. Actually, he had to cancel from the first place that he had scheduled because of the backlash, because it leaked. And then he tried to pivot to another one, unannounced, and then he was still heckled. Yeah. Now it's going viral on social media. Without social media and our presence, is that possible? Would people just lap it up? Here's the PM, and oh, thank God the PM is here, and look, he's paying attention to us. I don't know. Maybe it would be a very different reaction. So things are moving fast, and Mohammed was very wise when we were trying to figure out yesterday, get these videos, cut them up, put out something. Mohammed said something. He was completely correct. He's like, it's all about speed with these things. It was 100% accurate. When it comes to the social media and the narrative and breaking things, we saw everything, how quickly it moved with Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza. It's all about speed because everybody's ready to deploy a narrative. You have to be ready to deploy the counter narrative or blow up their narrative. You have to anticipate. We were trying to figure out, where's he going to go? Is he going to show up at another place? Who are the possible masajid that he could show up at now for a dinner?
Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, I was talking about Trudeau. Yeah, exactly. Or when it comes to the discourse, right? What are they going to say now? Okay, we've exposed the fact that it was, for example, Israel that was responsible for bombing the hospital. What are they going to say next? What are they going to say next? So it's a difference. It's almost like a microcosm, like the Piers Morgan interview, because instead of being reactionary, playing defense all the time, now we're going on the attack, and we're saying, okay, this is how they're going to react. Now we're going to do this. Now we're going to push for this. Now we're going to go there. And yeah, I mean, I think it's unprecedented. And it's actually, look at how much unity has come out of it. Look at how much sentiment, ummatic sentiment has come out of it. I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity here.
Yeah. So I would add to that basically in terms of like, why is everybody consistent? Well, to be honest, this question needs to be always answered to everybody at the age of 14, 15. Like when we were young, we read Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky, right? Yeah. And there's little videos that summarize that people don't like to read these days, but the mainstream media is synchronized at the end of the day. Left, right, center, everybody. Like when there's something that's the vital interest for any of the Western countries, especially the United States, these media will align very well, especially within the country of the host nation of the nation of the interest, of the vital interest, right? Yeah. So that's number one. Why is the West basically doing this? It's a political cover for the Israeli military to basically, accomplish the goals it's set for itself. Yeah. Why is the West supporting this? Is because they want to create that normalization between the Arab countries in the Middle East and Israel, resolve this Palestinian conflict from their perspective, and that means basically giving the crumbs to the Palestinians both on the West Bank, which is totally colonialized, to be honest. Yeah. People draw the West Bank as if it's a one piece. It's not one piece. Yeah. It's little, basically, there's settlements all over the place. It's literally divided into small little cantons, as they say.
Yeah.
Gaza is basically, how big is it? It's really like what, 30 miles by 10 miles, whatever it is.
It's 6 by 25.
Even less.
Yeah.
I don't know. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the United States has a goal, has a global interest. After Obama came with Hillary Clinton, there's something called the pivot to the Asia Pacific. This is something basically I spoke about 10 years before the pivot actually happened, because anybody who follows, I'm very interested in the Asian, the Chinese U.S. relationships, specifically the Sino-U.S. relationships. I visited China myself, and so this was going to come at any moment in time, and it happened during the Obama administration. The United States right now has as a primary threat to its own national interest is China. And for that to basically be the focus, you need some of these issues to be resolved, and you need to basically align some of your allies against the Chinese, and you need to create an economic corridor that rivals the Silk Road that the Chinese are trying to build. And the biggest ally for that is India. Now, for India to basically be connected to Europe and North America, there has to be a path of trade, a sea one and a land one. And the normalization between the Arab states and Israel is very important from the United States perspective. So the U.S. controlling the mainstream media from the Western perspective, especially after Brexit. After Brexit, there was a UK-US alignment that's really full.
Yeah.
And so they control that mainstream message, and they will basically give full political support to the Israelis to do whatever they want to do. And we're seeing it, like smashing a hospital with civilians. This is beyond war crimes.
Yeah.
From an international law perspective, from his historical perspective. Who would do that and get a pass, get a free ride?
That's a good point.
But the Americans and the Europeans gave full political cover for the Israelis to do that and to continue doing that.
Yeah.
And we just heard basically in the news yesterday or the day before that the UNRWA, which is the UN, relief organization and that works within Gaza from a school perspective, they lifted their people and their mission. They lifted they suspended their mission within these Gaza schools. So now basically you have schools filled with civilians without even a UN cover now. What are that doing? It's just inviting the Israelis to basically kill more and more and more. Literally just civilians, children, women, elderly, and sick. Imagine people in the hospital, sick people, you just kill sick people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually something that I really like that you brought up on Piers Morgan's show. You're like, I'm going to say it, white people. If it was white people, what would you say? Like, I think any, fair-minded person who is on the pro-Israel side should ask themselves, what if the ethnicities were reversed? What if it was the Arabs bombing the Jews?
Ukraine is not too far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Ukraine. And it's crazy because Israel is doing exactly what Russia has done. They cut off electricity and they're attacking people. And they're doing it so much worse because they put people in a concentration camp, basically, in a prison. And now they're indiscriminately bombing everyone in that prison. And it's funny because they say things like Hamas is using them as human shields and all this stuff when they shoved everyone in there together to begin with and didn't let anyone out. So it's like there's no real other choice there. But what's funny is you mentioned that America and all these nations are going to preserve their own interests. So even that makes me think even small things like Joe Biden visiting Israel at this time of war is for a very specific reason. And I've been hearing that
it's a political message, basically. That's as far as you can go with basically giving a political cover to another nation.
Yeah.
The president of the toughest country in the world to go give a visit and to assert and to support.
Yeah, 100%. And something that I heard, like Norman Finkelstein and some other people say, is he went so that Iran and other countries wouldn't try and launch any kind of attack, because then it's an attack on America as well. And when I told my wife this, she was like, they're using Joe Biden as a human shield, basically, to protect them from getting attacked, subhanAllah. But Professor, I want to ask you, what was your response when you first heard all this news come out and as it's panned over time?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. First of all, before I answer, I just want to remind us that the media reality, which is the reality for many Anglophone Muslims, particularly in the West, is not necessarily the real world. There are our people that are being massacred as we speak. We have to remember that. That's what we are talking. That's the real thing that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
We may be winning the media battle right now,
Mm-hmm.
and there are many, many more battles to come.
Mm-hmm.
But there are our people that are being massacred. There are children, 9-year-old girls who are writing their wills. That's their school exercise, because they know they may not make the week or the day. So each one of us that's a believer, that has a heart, that believes in Allah and His Messenger, has to be able to imagine that it's their children that are writing those wills, and what will we do for them? And the second thing that comes of that to me is that the iman that Ahl Gaza have, they are showing, that reminds us of the Sahaba, that reminds us of the best of our stories, right? Wallahi, each one of those Muslim countries in the world, the 55 Muslim countries, has that hidden within them. Including Muslims in the West, have among us people that have that kind of iman. It's just that Ahl Gaza have the honor by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they can practice it. Because Rasulullah said, Al-mu'min mir'at akhi. That you are the mirror of your brothers. If you want to see what's wrong with you, you see that. But also, what's strong in you, you see what's in your brothers. And what I see in Ahl Gaza makes me proud to be Muslim all over again. It makes me see in my Muslim community not just problems and quibblings and bad parking, but I see in them that these are the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen as kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhawna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah. This, every single Muslim country in the world has that. It's just that by our own limitations, by our own learned helplessness, we have deprived ourselves of that character, that behavior. So that's one. That to me, it breaks my heart, and I look at their courage and fills me with hope and strength. And wallahi, somebody was telling me this story, and to me, like, that was the truest story I wanted to hear. That was, I think Sheikh Ala might have told, or maybe Sheikh Amjad yesterday, that a woman who saw the story, the people of Gaza, I think Latin American woman, and she saw the Muslims' reaction to Gaza, Muslims in Gaza and Muslims around, and she became Muslim because of that. People who have been effectively in a concentration camp. It's not just open air prison, it's a concentration camp, Gaza. People who have been abandoned by their own people. The first people to abandon them are the Arabs around them, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi, UAE, the rest. People who have nothing but rocks and basic weapons against the most prepared army, the best army, of I think 5th best army in the world. And yet their iman is such that, as you were saying, Muhammad, yesterday, you recover a child out of rubble and he says, Gaza lana, this is ours, Al-Quds lana, Al-Quds lana. And I am so proud of being a Muslim. I'm so proud of belonging to the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I see, as somebody who thinks about the Ummah and the Ummatic Institute, our hope is to revive this in the Ummah. And I'm put to shame that these people who do not know whether they're going to make it to the next meal or if they will have a next meal have so much strength. That's, to me, the real story. And all of us, alhamdulillah, the good that we are doing, that's just a little flame from that fire, that iman, that nur that we see. And so we should see, each one of us see us as being inspired by that and doing. Now, the question of why do we see that uniformity? I think it is true that many of them, the media organizations, get a script from Tel Aviv, like from Israel. But that's not the real reason, in my view. The real reason is that Israel is a settler colonial state. It's the only settler colonial state in the world today. And like all settler colonial states, which is every single European country, every single country in the West was and became rich and built its culture and civilization and supremacy on colonialism. So they see a deep similarity and deep sympathy with Israel. There is a whole morality that goes with being a settler colonial. You have to debase other people. You have to do ethnic cleansing. You have to sometimes do genocides. And you have to change the language, right? You have to divide and rule. All of these things that Israel is doing, the Western civilization, the old Western civilization, sees itself in those practices. Mm-hmm. And for those practices to lose is something that, whether it's Piers Morgan or this whole media complex, it's just speaking to something really deep in Western culture. Yeah. And if these people lose, it's like we are losing all over again. That's one thing that we can all hold on to. Our colonialism was good. We had white men's burden, right? And so what we did to you guys, we took your wealth, we committed genocides, we subjected you to humiliation, we changed your language, all of that was good. But Israel is the last. And the other thing is that morality now has changed. Modern reciprocal morality, which is why I heard, is it this guy, Ben Shapiro saying, and then Richard, was the other guy, another apologist for genocide, this other guy. Anyway, so Ben Shapiro was saying something really deep, really profound, that just really struck me. He was saying that people, this young, particularly liberals, young people in the West who have seen the face of colonialism, of their own colonialism, right? That's why there's so much division in the West. They are holding us to new morality, rather than comparing us to what America did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And he could have gone on, like rather than comparing us to what Americans did to Native Americans or the slavery of millions of Africans, you're comparing us to your new morality. Yeah. He got it. He understands.
Well, I mean, Ben Shapiro recently, I think it was just yesterday, he put out a video talking about the nuclear option in no uncertain terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, look, I'm not sure if you saw it around me as well, because you're ahead of these things, but I just tweeted it the other day. Basically, he was saying that, he was basically making the point that, look, if Israel has to fight the war on two different fronts, then what could happen is that Israel might have to, employ the nuclear option or something to that effect. Wow. And so he was trying to suggest that if America doesn't help materially Israel, because this is a kind of almost blackmail, almost like a hidden blackmail, a veiled blackmail to the American populace. Like, if you guys don't do this, then this may happen, right? Wow. You're going to have this, obviously the nuclear option, frankly. I mean, the reason why they wouldn't probably do it is because it would damage their own infrastructure. Yeah. I mean, if you detonate a bomb like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I mean, look at Ashdod and Asqalan and all of these towns, they're right next to Gaza. So bombing Gaza in that manner, they will destroy their own towns and their air will be completely polluted for years on end and so on and so forth. Yeah. But the fact that he's using this language in the first place, it shows you the extent to which dehumanization is actually taking place. Yeah. 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 Like, if you're thinking about, okay, let's wipe them, and this is the word he used. I think he used a term like annihilate or eviscerate, a term like that, which means literally to wipe them out. Yeah, to exterminate effectively. This is the term he used. I mean, for someone to use terms like eviscerate or annihilate, or I can't remember exactly, probably eviscerate, to wipe out a population, and for there not to be pushback, even from his own quarters, from people in the right wing, it shows you really that it's a crass utilitarian judgment that these people are making.
It's
They're
a
saying-
culture. It's a culture. Full culture.
Yeah, I mean, like nowadays you'll find there are historians. I'm sure many of you have come across like World War II historians that say, well, look, if America didn't bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the way that it did, we wouldn't have been able to win the World War. Obviously, after that, Japan surrendered, and it tilted the balances of power and stuff. And if Japan, if it wasn't defeated and the balance of power wasn't thing, then the Nazis would have won, and then. And so it shows you here that we have, as Muslims, we have ethics of war. For us, these are non-options. They're never options to eviscerate or annihilate. It's interesting that these are the people who quiz us on these kinds of moralities. So why do you guys believe in killing and terrorism and so on? But you're the ones who are making a crass utilitarian judgment and justifying or proposing, or people are saying it within your quarters, annihilating an entire population, babies, women, children, animals, whatever you like, and it's not even being met with pushback. So I think this kind of thing needs to be exposed now, because if anything, this is a kind of psychosis or psychopathy, I should say. It's a psychopathy and sadism. I don't think people that speak in this manner and do so nonchalantly actually have any humanity left inside of them. But for you to think, so let me just speak nonchalantly about wiping away a population. At that point, I think you need to see medical help. You need to seek medical help.
It's so common that, I mean, to be honest, quickly, Rasul forbade us from even cutting a tree. Imagine a tree, a plant, a tree, one tree. It is haram to cut a tree if you're not going to use it for, like, you know, making fire or food or building a house or whatever it is. But what Dr. Ovamir basically reminded me is one of the, I think, politicians and congressmen or somebody in the United States was saying, he says the most dangerous thing for the American population is to know its real bloody history.
Wow.
Because if they knew it very well, especially the Gen Zs and the Alphas, I guess, which are coming up, it's going to basically make them almost self-hate themselves. This is what he was saying, if I remember exactly the wordings.
Well, that's what's happening.
And
that's the part. That's what's culture. The culture
within
war.
the right, within that narrow right. I think what we need to be doing is basically to really teach people their own history. I think as a history professor, as a Mohammed Hijab, mashallah, being a world-class social influencer. Well, let's go back to the 1500s and 1600s. What happened to the natives? What did these cultures do so they can maybe have a little bit of humility, and help in educating them? Like we're speaking about education. They're speaking about annihilation. It's crazy. We're speaking about it's literally impermissible to cut a tree, and he's speaking about wiping a whole. Society. This is like literally mind-boggling. So,
speaking of that history, if I may add this vignette that always shook me to my core. Recently, as documents have been declassified, it was made clear, and I checked it with, not only read in a book, but actually checked it with my colleague who's a historian of Japan, who said that this is widely accepted by new historians. That Truman, when he ordered the nuclear strike, he knew that the Japanese were ready to surrender. He wrote it in his diary.
So he knew that before they
Before.
Okay.
So Hiroshima and Nagasaki were dropped not to end the war, but to signal to the Russians who the top dog is.
To the world.
That we have this weapon, because Russians are the ones who had really won the war. They're land troops. And America was worried that this is going to have an influence on how the world order evolves afterward. So it was a political statement. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were political statements.
I mean, there's always, basically in political science, there's always a difference between the capability and the will to actually make the decision, the political decision. So they were signaling that, look, we don't just have it, we have the willpower in front of the whole world to actually use it.
But imagine what kind of being could do that.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Well, can I add to this?
Beyond crazy.
What's really, really interesting is that I think that this is actually permissible vis-a-vis their own ideologies. Like if you look at one of the top utilitarian thinkers in modern times, actually the one that probably is the last in line of where people do PhDs on him now effectively, is John Rawls. And he had this famous The Veil of Ignorance and all these kind of things. And he has statements in his works which amount to, it's not crass utilitarianism, but which amount to effectively, if the means justify the ends, even in terms of killing, standing in front of a cannon, doing all these kind of things, if death is justified, then it can be justified, which shows you that, once again, this should be emphasizing in points like this. The Islamic morality, when it comes to the ethics of war, is much more stringent and strict than utilitarian and liberal cosmopolitan alternatives. Because the thing is, liberals want to portray themselves, and when I say liberals here, I mean with a small L, not as in the big L left-wing type liberals. I'm talking about classical liberals. They want to portray themselves as having the high ground of morality.
Mohammed, you remind me basically
Yeah.
of a study that in my first course ever in my MBA,
Yeah.
we studied. There was a survey that's global in nature that happened maybe a couple of decades ago. To see the cultural differences. When I was doing my MBA, it was always about like cultural sensitivity and so forth back then. And one of the characteristics that they measured was being humane.
Yeah.
Okay, so they measured all the countries, like what is it, a couple hundred countries, let's say 192, whatever it is, right? What's the top 20 countries of most humane countries? Literally, I think 19 of them were Muslim, and one basically was like had considerable Muslim population in it. What's the least humane countries? North American, Scandinavian, Western Europe.
Wow.
I'd have to look at that.
It was an amazing.
Yeah.
It was an amazing. It was in the part of the organizational behavior, behavioral psychology course that we took, and I was subhanallah. I mean, it's.
I would like to look at
It's
that.
because of Islam converted the human to become more caring person.
Yeah.
Well, it also demonstrates the threat of secularism, right? Because if you structurally remove morality and ethics from every decision that's made, if you cordon off sort of spiritual concerns into private worship, personal piety, and things like that, you're only left with a vacuum that utilitarian, sort of valuations,
Definitely.
rushes to fill.
Yeah.
And then anything becomes justifiable.
Everything.
Because the quote-unquote real human being is just the atoms and
Bunch
cells.
of carbons and nitrogen.
Bunch of carbon and nitrogen, right? That's the real quote-unquote human being. So, okay, we can justify anything,
Yeah.
right? But, the pre-secular world where Islam and in other pre-secular societies, morality so structurally infused that gives limits, very strict limits, that can't even be recaptured now.
Yeah.
Because, or at least how things are configured now, because the way that secularism has rendered society, morality is just, you took an MBA, right? How many ethics courses did you take?
But ethics was embedded in every action module.
Oh, mashallah.
Because of Enron, like at that time Enron.
Oh, okay.
So
You're in
every
the-
course of ethics. I'm like, bro, it's finance, ethics, it's
Yeah.
accounting, ethics.
Right, mashallah. So that's an exception because there's
Yeah.
definitely a sense, like in medicine and in business, that
Yeah.
ethics is kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
Not the real work of what you're doing,
Yeah.
as opposed to actually every decision that you make being an ethical, religious decision that's going to have a consequence. In the
Yeah.
afterlife, it's going to have a consequence in your soul. It's a very different calculus.
But it's a different kind of ethics. What you're talking about, the kind of ethics, the secular ethics, which is not grounded in truth, but
Correct.
rather in fact. It's grounded in
In interest.
yes,
In their own interest. If
It
there's
is
no interest,
grounded
there's no
in
ethics.
interest, right?
Yeah?
So, I, for example, know that everywhere there are DEI trainings in Western corporations, departments, universities, everywhere, diversity, equality, right, inclusion, and similarly Title IX, which is sexual harassment training. And I also know that almost everybody treats them as like these modules of training of these ethics as artificial,
Right.
as political.
Yeah, they roll their eyes at them.
Right.
There's a lot of
So ethics are there, but you know that they're coming out of a particular ideology, that those who are promoting that ideology often, they are doing that as a political project, not because it's some higher ethics that's
No, yeah.
neutral. It's like because I'm pushing myself. And those who are disliking it and doing it, they're doing it also because they know it's a political project. So again, ethic itself means something different.
We used to speak about the legal versus the ethical,
right.
because not everything ethical
Right.
is legal.
Right.
I guess
You can keep going because the camera's going to be on you.
Okay, so we're saying basically that at the time we were discussing basically the difference between the legal and the ethical, because the ethical is not enforced by the law really in many cases. I don't want to say like all cases, And that's why basically the discussion was like, if you can get the question is, if you can get away with it,
Right.
would you still do it, or would you be ethical? Which one is it?
Right.
And they didn't have a good reason why I should, as a human, from their perspective, why should I basically comply with the ethics if it's against my interest?
Sure.
And definitely one of the biggest studies, again from an MBA perspective, use cases, was both there's a GM case and there's a Ford case, where they build a car that was going to kill people. Like basically that they know that it will, 1% of people will basically be killed due to the malfunction in the cars. So they had to decide between doing a recall, fixing it, or basically letting people die and taking care of the lawsuits. And a'udhu billah, seriously, this is shocking. In both cases, GM and Ford decided to let it go and take care of the lawsuits because way more cheaper from a financial perspective.
Wow.
So they went against the ethical. Those two were basically some of the main use cases we studied within the ethical module and the legal. In Islam, it's haram. In Islam, the ethical and the legal are the same.
Yeah, there's no distinction.
There's no distinction.
The redefinition of law is the problem because
Exactly.
you've redefined law. And if you look to the colonial history, this is what the colonizers did everywhere they went. You know, the British in Malaysia and in the subcontinent and elsewhere, the French, the Dutch. One of the first things that they did was redefine what law meant.
Yeah.
Because if you open up a fiqh book, the first chapter of a fiqh book is water. It's not criminal law. It's not financial law, right? There's an ethical unicity to the idea of what law is in the Sharia, which is completely foreign to the Western tradition.
Oh, definitely.
Like, so having separated the two, then it becomes an issue of, oh, well, what can we get away with?
Yeah.
You know, the calculus will always sort of win out.
And especially maybe a communist mind might see it a little bit different, but not too far. But a capitalist mind that basically emphasizes
Right.
the personal interest, I mean, like, it's no-brainer. Like,
Yeah.
And I still remember some of the, it's been a while, but I remember basically in the class, you know, we did some group exercises. If you have like $100,000 and if you pick it up and nobody's going to see, what are you going to do, and blah, blah. Most people decided to take it. Like, why wouldn't I? The question is like, why wouldn't I take $100,000 on a table? Nobody's going to see, there's no cameras, and you're going to get away with it. Why
Right.
not?
Yeah.
Like, what's a good reason, you know? Subhanallah.
Yeah, and something like that, it's funny because the cure to that is saying, okay, there's a greater good than my self-interest, and that's hard for a lot of people to do or to say. And even if they say there is a greater good, whatever that greater good is it's not enough. It's not enough for a lot of people, unless it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because even then, there's some kind of self-interest that I won't be punished for it.
We discussed that specifically. Like, some of the members of the class said, who cares about the greater good? I just care about myself.
Yeah.
Islam aligns it by saying, okay, you yourself will go to hell if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
So you have no escape. It becomes personal. Like, then that's the issue with basically, you know, secular thinking, or literally non-Islamic, which is whatever it is. It's all secular, really, at the end of the day. Is that if there's no Jannah, and I'll give you another study that we studied also within the, I forgot which course, but also in the MBA. There was a PhD in America doing a history of the American Civil War. And it is what the article was saying. Basically, it was commonly known that in the American Civil War there was no rape. She's like, in every war there's rape. So she delved into the manuscripts of the old sheriff offices of all the states that happened the Civil War, and she looked at so much rape reports. At that time, it's like, what the heck's going on? And one of the things that she said, this was on C-SPAN, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It was not part of the NBA, it was C-SPAN. It was a book that she wrote, I guess. And she went and interviewed lots of soldiers in America who've been deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq War, and even before, Vietnam veterans and so forth. And she asked them this question. It's like, why would you rape somebody in war? And why is rape more? Like, she didn't make it personal. She asked a question in a market research mindset. Why do soldiers basically give themselves the okay signal to rape people in war? And the consistent message or answer she got from all the soldiers of all different types and so forth is like, because there's no accountability. If I can do it, why not? Yeah. And this is the difference between basically believing in a day of judgment and not believing in one.
Yeah.
Makes the world a place of beasts, really.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening in Gaza, in East Turkestan, in Burma and Myanmar, all over the world. I mean, we're living in a world that's so vicious, people just calculate the material interest and they will basically smash everybody.
Well, there's two things to be said about this. I mean, I think what we're talking about at root really is crass individualism, right? which in many ways is very, very similar to what is referred to as ethical egoism. In fact, some of the definitions of liberalism or social liberalism are in fact a focus on the individual, like the individual sovereignty and so on. So it's effectively part of their religion to believe that the individual should be prioritized in assessment in terms of vis-a-vis, like the other structures or the collective or whatever. Of course, there is a discussion among scholars and stuff like that within the liberal framework of collectivism or communitarianism versus individualism and stuff like that. You might have come across that.
Yeah.
But the point is this, is that there's two things to be said about this. First of all, it's a morally defunct ideology with no proof for its for its proposition. And the second thing is, on consequentialist grounds, it's actually a very weak system as well, because there's a hadith, we were just discussing it in the car the other day. It was, there's like a ship, and then there's people on the bottom of the ship and the people at the top of the ship, and the people on the bottom of the ship are taking the planks out of the ship. And what's being said here is that if these people at the bottom are allowed to take the planks off the ship for their own interest, or what they consider to be their own interest, in fact everyone on the ship is damaged. So the assumption that my interest my selfish, egoistic interest should supersede the interest of other people it's not actually in your interest to think of your interest in that way, if that makes sense. So it's not actually in your best interest to think of your interest. Selfishness is not actually an effectual way of securing your interest. You can put this in any context. For example, in the context of a relationship between a husband and a wife. If either of the parties, husband or wife, act in a completely selfish way, then you can expect reciprocity in that regard, and therefore the family will be destroyed. And likewise, a community or a country or whatever, if people act in effectively selfish ways, then reciprocity becomes removed from the analysis, and that destroys communities. So acting selfish is not in your best interest. So that's one thing in terms of individualism and its weaknesses from a consequentialist perspective and from other ontological perspectives. But the other thing is this, is that we can't assume as Muslim people that these people are either going to convert to our morality or that they're going to start becoming compassionate all of a sudden. This is their religion. Suffice it for us to know that this is their religion. Okay, so how do we deal with a people like this? And I say the following: if you've ever been to a circus, okay, you'll see huge beasts and animals, like, you see an elephant, you see giraffe, you see all this kind, you might even see a lion, And you ask yourself, how on earth did such a beast, or could such a beast, be subdued by people who are in many ways lesser than, in terms of physicality and so on? Especially look at an elephant, And some of the ways in which, and I've heard this, and I'm no expert in circuses and how they manage animals, but the ways in which they subdue an animal effectively is making them think that they're not capable of something. Like think of the following thing, right? You got a small elephant, I don't know how much they weigh, 400, 500 kilos, at the age of whatever it is, right? They tie its leg to, a pole of some sorts. So it can't move because the pole is going to keep it in its place. Yeah. When that elephant gets big, okay, and it's a few tons now, really and truly, the elephant can remove itself from the chains. And I'm saying in this analogy, we, the Muslim Ummah, are the elephant. It's that we've got the chain around our foot, but we have the power to remove it from our foot. Wow. Because we are the sleeping giant. We are what Arnold Toynbee referred to as the sleeping giant. If only we knew our capabilities. Because do you know who knows our capabilities full well? They know our capabilities. Why do you think they keep coming into our countries? Wow. Why do you think they keep taking our oil? Because they know this is a sleeping giant. They know our capabilities so well that we are effectively the animals in the zoo. We're the elephant in the circus. Wow. And it's only a matter of time until we, the Muslim people, leverage our advantages, okay, and are able to break free from the chain
subjugation
of those particular zoo owners or circus people. So what I'm saying is we need to be able to know, as a critical self-assessment, what are our strengths? Because the truth is, you were talking about Piers Morgan, 30 years of experience. Many people would have come in. Even my sister, when I was driving towards him, she says, he's 30 years of experience. Be careful of this guy. I said to her, listen, I'm going to run this guy over. That's what I said to her. Because I had the feeling, that's it. There's no doubt about it. Why? Because I have Iman, the guy doesn't have Iman. Why? Because if it came down to it, anybody who wants to go against me in this issue, I'd be willing to sacrifice my life on the issue. Are they willing to sacrifice their life?
No.
I mean,
it's really iman, but plus you're skilled. I think the skill
sure.
plus the iman.
No, but his competence is there. But I'm saying that you look at Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu anhu, right? Why is it, we keep asking this question, why is it that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was able to do what he done, and for example, the expansions of the early Muslims? It's because of self-belief inspired by tawakkul, inspired by iman. And so we adopt Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's attitude and leverage our strengths. There's no doubt that the Ummah will rise again, and it will be the waking giant, in fact, and that these guys are going to have a challenger again in the world, which is going to affect the entire landscape. So, but we just need to know, as individuals and as collectives, as communities, that we are stronger than we think we are.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can. You remind me of a quote by Zbigniew Brzezinski in one of his later books. He said that 70% of the world natural resources, not speaking about gas and oil only, 70% of the world's natural resources lie within the Middle East. Five of the 7 strategic waterways, international waterways, trade routes of the world lie within the Muslim world. The most youthful nation is the Muslim Ummah. The Ummah of Islam is unified through one creed, one deen, one philosophy of seeing life, which is through Tawheed. The Muslim Ummah is unified through one language, the Arabic language. People who don't speak it at least read it, can have some access to it. If it's not the whole population, some portion of every ethnicity in the Muslim world, whether you're Berber or whether you're Indo-Pak, whether you're Indonesian, people love the language, want to learn it, want to access it. So all these things put together makes us definitely the number one contender, the Habib of the world on the world stage. And the most beautiful thing about that, maybe I'll just slip that through, is that we're humane. We want to take care of people. We love everybody, even we care about the non-Muslims more. They care about themselves, and we want justice. We want peace. We want prosperity for everybody. And it's not a claim, because we've proved it for 1,300 years. Sorry, doctor.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair. I love the analogy that Muhammad used of the chained elephant who doesn't know his strength. I love that, and it's learned helplessness.
Oh, definitely.
Right, we have learned that we are helpless, and the tragedy is that our ulama, our intellectuals, have learned this helplessness, and they're the ones who constantly tell us. And so what we have, and I also want to rethink the categories of us, them. Look, it is true that we have iman and aqidah, but there are how many people in the West that we encounter daily who, if they only knew, would be Muslims, better Muslims than us.
Yeah.
Right? Because fitra, despite all the corruption of ideologies and systems in the world, fitra is like burst through people's experience. How is it possible to have every battle, every war, like in technology, in organization, in media, in basically Western surveillance today is unprecedented in human history. The capacity of governments, the capitalism's manufacturing of human mind, not just consent, because consent means that you had some free will.
Yeah.
It's manufacturing of the desire itself. Despite that,
Yes.
you give a talk on Islam anywhere, and their fitra bursts through, and you see people coming to Islam. So I don't want to see us looking at the world as like, these people in the West, but rather is that you have elites.
Yeah.
You have people that are turned against their own people, right? The vast majority of people would see the beauty of Islam. And in the Muslim world, you have elites as well, who have tied their interests to their masters, either in the West or now the rising powers in China or India or whatever. So that's how, there are multiple divisions of the world, and we have to keep in mind that there are so many people, so much suffering in the West of their own people because of this inhumane mentality.
Yeah.
They learn colonialism. They try that on poor people. They actually tried that first on Latin Americans, other Christians. and then tried that and us and perfected this exploitation on us. But then they turned on their own populations, the same tactics. So much so that, I guess one small example of that is the cop who killed George Floyd. The tactic that he was using in Ferguson was what Israelis use on Palestinians, and they were trained. So American cops are trained by these Israelis. So you turn against your own population. You cannot keep the international and the domestic separate forever. Right? So in a sense, people would see Islam here, and that's the great fear. That's why you're talking about why that messaging, this colonial messaging, effectively genocide, another genocide happening, everybody knows that. And you are supporting it almost with one voice, except for there are some leftist voices, there are progressive voices that have recognized that system. And actually that's breaking through, and they're scared of that breaking through in people. But my point is that how is that? It makes no sense when there is so much emphasis on, you control the narrative, you're the good, right? The West today, there is so much emphasis on being good and being ethical in the West. It's unprecedented in some ways, and it's completely hollow. Like it's almost like it's compensation. People who wiped out an entire population, committed genocide of Native Americans, and then did slavery, practiced slavery institutionally for 300 years, and then have waged war constantly on the world. What do you think they're feeling? Like if this were a person, what would be in the conscience of that person? How would that person behave? That's how the Western elite behave. Like, you're guilty, you have to compensate, talking about morality, and then when your children take that talk seriously and they turn against you, you have a problem, you have a crisis. I think that's part of what's happening a lot.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why that congressman said that. Like they want to hide that history from their children.
A small point is that the history continues and continues to be reenacted in the present. Like that's the interesting thing. A lot of people don't realize too. I was talking with Joel at breakfast and bringing up the court case because he asked us what native nations are indigenous to our area of New York. It's the Oneida Nation. And they've been actually successful in sort of some, taking the government to court for some land claims. However, one of the champions of the left, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, ruled against them in a case that went to the Supreme Court in their attempt to reclaim land back that was swindled from them from the state of New York. Now, okay, that's the decision, but what did she cite in her decision? She cited the doctrine of discovery. Nothing less than the doctrine of discovery. Yeah, and it was just like a mask-off moment. It's like this is
that a constitutional point, or is that?
No, it's not. It precedes the Constitution. This is a papal bull, issued in the late 1400s.
Is that something she could cite? Like,
I don't know the legality when it comes to, but
explaining the
legal opinion, the ultimate precedent that she referred to was none other than the one that lumped Native Americans in with what they call in the text of the papal bull Saracens, which is us Muslims, right? That legitimized the seizure.
That's a very powerful point,
that we were lumped together, right, at the beginning of that papal bull, that Christians were legally considered able to and legally justified to seize any land that they came across.
Like manifest destiny, right?
Exactly, that belonged to any, they called pagan.
What was the name of the Supreme Court ruling?
It's 2008, Oneida versus, I forget if it's the United States or if it's Sherrill. It might be Sherrill.
Was it like how many voted for? Do you know the numbers?
Oh no, I don't recall off the top of my head. But it's an interesting case to see because again, like there's the strict legality in the Constitution, but then there's the way that they justify it. And other people have made different comments about. We've had a lot of really interesting Supreme Court cases in the last 20 years. The way that they justify it often is more revealing than even necessarily what's explicitly on law.
What judgment they make.
Yeah, exactly. So this is something that the colonial history still continues, and you could make an argument as well in places that are still have significant tracts of wild land, that even the land grab still continues, right? Because you've gone from, in different places of the United States, I don't know how much of a problem this is in Canada, where you had public access to lakes and lake shores and lake fronts and things like that. And now you have the proliferation of Airbnbs and sort of rocketing sort of commodification. It's almost like exponential commodification, where things that were once accessible by anybody are now under lock and key. So there are ways in which the colonial project continues to sort of reiterate itself. So the past and present's very much
turns on itself.
Yeah,
in a sense.
yeah. And
Do you
it's
know,
connected.
I wanted to, because I'm probably anticipating there's going to be people on the other side listening to this and saying, oh, well, you guys talk about colonialism, but let's be honest, the Muslim world has been, doing the colonialism itself. And if you guys were in power and you were the hegemony, you'd be doing the same thing. To that, I would respond in the following way, right? I would say, and this is, we had a guy in actually the Sapiens Institute, which obviously I'm a member of or co-founder of, which is, it's got some material for those who want to learn this kind of stuff we're talking about today. There's a free learning platform and stuff like that, which people can go on. But anyway, Shabir Akhtar, who worked in the University of Oxford, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He wrote a few books, and in one of his books, he said the following thing. He said let's call it what it is. And this is him saying it. He said, he died recently, so Allah yarhamu. He said, let's call it what it is. Fine. In the early Islamic expansions, you want to call it imperialism, Fine. There was Islamic imperialism. No problem. Yeah. He said there's a difference between Islamic imperialism, this is how he put it, and the Western project. And he said the difference is in the following way. He said when land was being, for example, conquered effectively by the Muslim people, the resources were not being transferred back to Mecca. Right. So here's what's going on. Like the European project, there's two things which categorize it and differentiate it from, let's say, for example, the Islamic conquests, if you want to call it that. Number one is racism. Okay, now we're not saying racism didn't exist, but legally speaking, there is no racism in Islam, and there's no doubt about that. Or you can go all the way up to the Enlightenment period and to the 18th century, 19th century, even the 20th century, and you'll see justification of racism from some of their protagonists and some of their champions. Look at Charles Darwin. He thought that black men had a fifth thumb on their feet, and that they were savages, and that this kind of thing was taken by a lot of the kind of nationalists to justify some of the stuff. So anyway, that's one thing that differentiates. And obviously connected to that is slavery, which is race-based. I mean, there was slavery in the Muslim world. No one's going to deny that. There was slavery, indentured servitude, and whatever. But it was also with white people. Okay, so for example, Mullah Ismail, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this man, right? But in fact, there's a book that's written, it's called White Gold, written by a conservative person, a right-wing conservative. Mullah Ismail he's on the record of having the most kids in human history, like 400 kids or something like that. And he had like Giles referred to in his book as pleasure palaces, filled with effectively Western European white slaves. So much so that he was called over to the United Kingdom to, ask to free the slaves. And there's a whole story about that. But the point is that slavery wasn't discriminatory based on race in the Muslim world. That's something very, very specific. There was justification. That's one thing. The second thing is this, and this is the point I want to embellish maybe or kind of expound upon, which is Shabir Akhtar's point, is that the resources weren't being moved. People weren't being kicked out of their homes. Yeah. And that's not something which is legitimate. Islam doesn't say when you conquer a land, kick people outside of their houses, take their land over, take their steal their resources, and bring it back to your country. That is a very specific type of European colonialism. Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about. If it was a matter of, okay, let's be very straightforward. If it was a matter of you take over my land, but you allow me to live in it, you allow me to live in it with my religion, that's the kind of tolerance that Islam...
You become a citizen too.
I'm part of this country. This is my house. This is my property. This is my thing. Don't take this away from me. Don't try and steal my stuff. Don't discriminate on basis of race. I can still live with my religion. If it was a matter of that, to be honest with you, it wouldn't be as controversial at all. I mean, if that's how the takeover took place, we wouldn't have as much of a problem with it. But the problem with Israel is as follows. Number one, it's doing all the things. It's a race-based apartheid system. And there's something called the 1973 Convention of Apartheid, by the way, the UN. And this convention has 8 conditions. Of those conditions, one of those conditions is if you have laws which effectively discriminate on the basis of race. One of the laws which effectively discriminate on the basis of race, and it's indubitable, it's incontrovertible, and it's impossible to deny because it's enshrined within the legal system, is the right of return. It's called aliyah. This right of return law says any ethnic Jew can come back to Israel, right? Ethnic Jew. And listen to this, if they convert to Islam or Christianity, that their right is suspended. Now, on all counts, according to everybody, effectively, according to the UN, this must be a breach. This must be apartheid, according to the Convention of 1973. That's one thing. The second thing is, you've got the seizures of properties, and we all know what's happening in the West Bank. We all know that. But it's enshrined in law, the absentee property rights and so on. And then you have the detentions and all the detentions and all that kind of stuff. This is apartheid.
Even access to roads. There are certain roads that Palestinians can use, and there's others just for the settlers.
Yeah,
beautiful.
It is the worst kind of racism. It's worst kind of apartheid. And the UN judge John Dougal said, a UN judge from South Africa, that this is Palestine, right? Israel is worse apartheid
than South Africa.
South Africa.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry.
But I want to
go ahead.
Just to add to the point that you made about Islamic conquest. First of all, conquests have been happening throughout history. There are good conquests, bad conquests. We can talk about that. But another major difference. You talk about resources not flowing back to Mecca and Medina. That was part of it.
Yeah.
But there was a bigger part that made them categorically different. The Arabs, whenever they settled somewhere, within one generation, their distinction from the local population was significantly mitigated because they were intermarrying. Or even if they're not intermarrying, they're not allowed to expel people out of their homes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. And so there's intermixing happening of communities, trade happening. They are different from people only in their religion, right? And people are converting to Islam, and those who are not converting, they're getting their rights as a legal status as dhimmis. Yeah. And in the Islamic lands, you have Christian communities that thrive, that lived for 1400 years throughout the Jewish communities, right? Because these people, once you have your community, and in some cases, you have really cases when they would prefer to live under Islam than elsewhere, because you get that protection. And
like after the Inquisition in 1949.
Right. The Jews, in fact, moved massively to the Ottoman lands. Right. And you have some of the biggest writers, authors, scholars, intellectuals, Jews that are writing, like
Maimonides.
Damascus. Maimonides is an example. But what makes Western colonialism, not just Israel is I think the most egregious version of it, or one of the most egregious.
Yeah, of course.
Is that so? When the British went to India, they did not intermarry.
No.
They did not become part of the people. They were governing, and these people literally were lower human beings, right? So the racism and scientific discoveries of the time are being put to use for the purpose of this. They're creating basically their own version. Because the British did not move en masse and did not create colonies there, you didn't need to do apartheid. It was basically they were just officers controlling India. Similarly, what the French are doing in Algeria, or the Italians doing in Libya, or what they were doing in the Americas, they did not intermarry with people and become one with them. Whereas what happens in Islam, within 1 century, the Persians, the Central Asians, the Egyptians and the Syrians, the lands taken over by Islam, they are the ones who become cultural elites. Because it's so much so that the conquest itself was disruptive to the people who did conquering, because all the things that you won were gone in a generation. And so much so that, the Umayyads by the end of the century, first century the Persians have overrun them in through scholarship, Central Asians. That's because Islam is the real signature of status and the real lawgiver, right?
Melting pot, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So you do get. So the point is, people who are converting to Islam and those who people are not converting, both of them, you cannot say that the Arabs are outsiders for more than a century, even in lands there, because, and that's what the difference between, right? Apart from other differences, that's a major difference. What continuous colonialism is that the French never became Algerians.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to add one more, even I would say it's one of the most important things. So, the transfer of resources from the periphery to the center. Didn't happen in Islamic history. The discrimination and the equality in front of the law and the citizenship. All this stuff is amazing. And we're gonna add one more that to these four things, which is the hardest, I would say, for any colonial history to prove, is the development. Like when the United States basically conquered Iraq, what did they do? Did they go build hospitals and universities and research centers and education? The Muslimin, whenever they put their first thing they would do, they build schools. And they will build hospitals, and they'll build the roads, and they'll build the markets, and they'll create jobs, and they'll feed the poor. Actually, the money transfer in certain cases went from the center to the periphery. As we can add that to the first point. But the development, the human development, I would say is maybe one of the most shining moments where Muslimin come in. Yes. How can you basically accuse me of being imperialist and colonialist when I'm coming in? Right. Yeah. I'm building a civilization. I'm building the economy. Yeah. I'm building the scientific community.
And just to add to that,
I'm feeding the poor. Yeah. I'm taking care of all the human beings. Zero discrimination. We're building hospitals. We're treating the ill. Wallahi al-Azim, how can anybody
take for example
call this colonialism?
Sure. Let's take for example the Mali Empire, right? Mansa Musa, everyone knows his name. I mean, he's seen by some historians as the richest man who ever lived. A black man and an African kingdom he reigned over. No one can say that, well, the Muslims colonized him. Because if anything, he was the power.
Yeah.
So it's Islam that gave certain kingdoms in certain areas the power, the strength. Anyone can get to the top. Turks got to the top. Persians got to the top. Arabs got to the top. Black Africans got to the top. And so on and so forth. There was no such thing as... That's the difference between Islamic, if you like, expansionism. Or if you want to even call it that, for the sake of argument.
Expansionism is fine.
Yeah, if you want to call it, no problem. For the sake of argument, call it imperialism, for the sake of argument. And this system that these people have. Because really what Israel is a racially supremacist state.
Yeah.
That's effectively what it is. Yeah. And this should be the narrative here. I think one of the strongest points that we can put to kind of interlocutors in this case is ask them if they're racist. Like seriously, I mean, do you believe that if you are black that you're better than you're white? If you're white that you're better than you're black? If you believe white skin makes you more superior human being, for example. Okay, you're not. We accept you're not a racist. Fine, you're not a racist. Do you accept that there's discrimination based on race in Israel? And you can cite, for example, the right of return law, Aliyah, and this, that. Yeah. Is this racism or not? Because if racism is bad and Israel's doing racism, therefore Israel is bad.
Yeah.
Okay. If you push someone in that direction and they say no, I mean I don't believe in it, then you can know for a fact that person's either a propagandist or that they're sympathetic to, because don't forget these Jewish people in Israel for the majority, they're Ashkenazi, they're European Jews, they're white Jews. I mean the Sephardim, who are like more my color, if you like, Arab-looking Jews, and the Ethiopian Jews, even top newspapers like Haaretz, who's the left-wing newspaper, they report consistent racism to these subsections of people in society. So I think the racism angle, because we can only understand dehumanization through racism. The West has been lecturing us and the rest of the world about equality and race, and yet they're acquiescent to the greatest racial apartheid that's happened probably in the last 100 years, including their own adventures.
I mean, it's not as if it's something in the past. It's still been in the United States. The Patriot Act is applied on who? Who's a terrorist? If it's a white Christian, it's a mentally ill person. If it's a Muslim,
but the thing is with the Patriot Act, Islam is not a race as much as in
but still racism, still discrimination.
You could argue, but it's more indirect. What I'm saying is in Israel, it's specific. So when they say Jewish, we're talking about ethnic Jew. We're talking about white guy.
I would say you just said yourself that basically the right for return of the Jews. But they had to exclude the Muslim.
Well,
so there's different.
It's both, and that actually was the point that I wanted to make. Was the last addition to the differences is a great question to address the differences between Islamic conquest and colonial conquest. Is that they have no such thing as la ikraha fi din. We have no such thing as kill the Indian, save the man. right? This entire sort of, as opposed to the conquering of the external, the destruction of the internal, the wiping away of epistemologies, the destruction of worldviews, the destruction of sort of, ways of knowing and stuff like that. We have no equivalent to that. Here's Islam. We believe in da'wah, we believe in balagh. If you accept it, great, congratulations, you're one of us. But you have, and this is implicit in what you said, you have your independence, you have your sort of community, it's intact. Whereas the colonial project from the beginning, was always about trying to reshape not only the exterior but the interior of human beings. Right.
In fact, one of the ways that I teach my students this, which is we don't have to teach it this way, but it's easier because people want to understand. Like we have freedoms today. You didn't have freedoms in Islam, and I say that in some way. Look, the freedom that you have in modern liberal nation state is individual freedom, right? An individual is equal standing before the state. But it's individual that the state is dealing with, individual that the state punishes and applies law on. Whereas in Islam, to see the individual alone outside of the community was considered itself the greatest violation of what it means to be a human. We might say in modern terms, this was the biggest human right in Islam, that if you're a Christian, the laws that you're going to follow, isn't that amazing? Are going to be from your own religion in your personal communal laws. Right. You will be part of the community. You will not be separated from that community. We will not even say to you, we know that drinking alcohol is bad. It's an ill, it's an evil. But we will not say that you have to follow our law, that our courts will come after you. Why? Because you have your own religious leaders and your own community that you will belong to. So it is as if that Islam is giving the freedom, greater freedom to the community, and this is being given to people that Islamic law is declaring that they are upon falsehood. Right? People who say lies about our Prophet ﷺ. I mean, imagine that they say the Prophet ﷺ was وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ a liar. We not only accept them as a community, but the Islamic law says that you cannot force them to be Muslim, first of all. You cannot go and pressure them unfairly to become Muslim. And when they live in their community, you actually let them live as fully human beings. And to be a full human being means that I live by my norms of my community. When I have a problem with my wife, I go to my priest, and I live as part of a community. So that community is part of human right. Whereas in the modern state, the state decides that you cannot marry, you can have as many women as you want, but you cannot legally marry more than one. That's going to apply to everyone. It doesn't matter what you believe, doesn't matter what your religion says, right? And that's true for everything. So
it's very oppressive.
Right. It's in that sense, the kind of freedom it is giving you, right? It's defining the kind of freedom it's giving you. Giving you freedom as an individual, and then it's constantly acting to strip the community. Right? To peel off. Basically, it's trying to destroy the community that might compete with the nation state.
To create consistency, I'd like to go back to the point with Imam Tom that, whenever basically the argument in any of my classes come in about the forced conversion by the sword, they accuse Muslims that they've converted people by the sword. I tell them this is ludicrous. This is totally negatable, because we believe in la ikraha fid din, meaning a Muslim, by definition, does not consider another person under coercion who takes the shahada to be Muslim in the first place.
Right.
And if I couldn't, for example, basically prove coercion or whatever it is, we believe that the person who is lying about their state of being Muslim, being outwardly basically saying the shahada, inwardly keeping a different belief, is worse than a disbeliever. So, you're speaking about basically killing the Indian, saving the man. Like, that would, from our perspective as Muslims, that would put the person in more bigger jeopardy from a eternal perspective, eternal damnation. So definitely, the Muslimin would never force anybody to convert to Islam. And we wouldn't consider them Muslim if that coercion was proven. And
this point is, by the way, granted by historians unanimously. There were no forced conversions.
Oh, definitely.
Sometimes, in fact, they were discouragement, tax-based discouragement from conversion, at least in the Umayyad period. But there were no forced conversions. We have fairly
it's amazing.
definitive evidence
Yeah.
from each major
Exactly.
region.
Yeah.
Richard Bullitt.
Yeah.
Richard
We're-
Bullitt has some nice books about, the
Yeah.
difference.
I do want to end talking about Israel again because it's happening now. It's a very, very vile time, unfortunately. And I think it's important to leave the audience, the Muslims, with some kind of action item. So it is very true what you said. In the UN, I remember I read the reports from like 2018, a few years ago, recently, and they cited the Universal Human Rights Charter of Universal Human Rights, which Israel, I think every other, like many other countries signed on, and they quoted this law violates this legislated here in the Universal Human Rights, that the fact that they have to use different rules, they have different passports, they're confined to the Gaza Strip, all these things are discriminatory and they go against human rights, which is something that you mentioned, that every single person has to be judged equally under the law. And it doesn't matter what the race, religion is, and Israel violates every single one of those things. So with this being the case, and this being neglected by, I'd say, a lot of the political leaders, the media, and these propagators or these pro-Israel arguers or debaters, or whatever you want to call them, what as Muslims can we do now to continue shifting the narrative? What are the next steps?
I'd say read up and first understand what's happening. The more you understand about what's happening, the more you realize that there is no debate. And so just give you one example. Professor Ross Siegel, who is an expert on genocide studies in the United States, Stockholm University, Israeli Jew, said, and this is an episode in Democracy Now! Over the last week, but he said that what is happening in Israel is a textbook case of genocide. Like that. So genocide is much greater than apartheid. We're not just talking about an apartheid, which has been going on for 75 years. This is a genocide in what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah.
That is every single, in fact, there are 3 different criteria or 3 different stages of genocide. Like any one of them is met as a genocide. Israel is doing all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And this is Israelis, this is one example that I gave. But Israeli activists, professors, scholars, those in Israel have been saying this. So learn what's happening, learn these facts, right? And just for example, you cited the United Nations. Those are things that are not hard to discover. So
very accessible.
Become an expert in that. It doesn't take long. I think somebody needs to put together a course of top 10 books we need to read and articles. But that's often I find that Muslims are talking, our heart is hurting, and when your heart is hurting, it's difficult to focus on details. So that's why I'm almost asking you against your motivation, against your inclination. When your heart is hurting, you just want to do something about it, you want to hurt, right? Stop that and learn the details. Learn exact facts.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Before I pass it on to the rest of you guys, there's an ayah you quoted a few times, that they only will fight you from behind fortified walls or fortified places. The rest of the ayah, I think, is just as important because it talks about them being divided amongst themselves. What on the topic of educating yourself, I had no idea that there was basically like Israel was on the brink of some civil war. That people like really hate the government. They're split like right down the middle of who wants to remove the Supreme Court, who doesn't, all this stuff. But obviously they're united in their Jewishness and them being all Israeli. But them in America and other civilizations that even though they work together have their own separate interests at the end of the day. So they are inevitably divided. So I think it's even more important for us to come together as Muslims to kind of combat this. We need more.
He suggests to Sapiens to put together a course on that. Like educating what's happening in Israel.
I think
and
Abdullah
what can be
Andalusi
done.
has already done one for the Quran Institute, which is a very good course. I know what the contents of that course is. Sapiens is going to do that as well. But Abdullah Andalusi has got some really good material on that already, and some of his debates. Sometimes watching debates is quite good at that as well. I was going to say that in terms of what you mentioned. Look, I mean, the fact is this: is that Israel, as quote unquote, right, state, 18% of the population are Palestinian, right? And the reason why we're in this situation is because, look, if Gaza and the West Bank were to be, let's say, incorporated into the state of Israel, there'll be a majority
Wow.
I'm not sure if you knew that, but it would be over 50% of people that would be Palestinians. Now, you were talking about, لا يقاتلونكم جميعا إلا في قرى محصنة أو من وراء جدر بأسهم بينهم شديد تحسبهم جميعا وقلوبهم شتى ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يفقهون. That you think that they are united, but they're in fact separated. The truth of the matter is that's exacerbated by what you call proportional representation. So there's different ways of voting people into office. The Knesset, which is the legislature for Israel, it uses the most, if you like, ironically, right, what people consider the most democratic means, because you've got different ones. You've got first past the post, which, for example, if you have one vote, it exacerbates that vote. Then you have AV, for example. Then you have the list system or PR. So let's say, for example, you had all of these Palestinians, and effectively you could, that's why they would never accept a one-state solution, by the way. We don't even want that ourselves, but I'm just telling you why they haven't incorporated Gaza and the West Bank from their interest into their own state, because they know that, okay, well, if you have 55% Palestinians, they could vote their own guy in. Yeah. And then the apartheid aspect would become even more apparent, would be more ridiculous, as you were saying. And it was a good point that you made when we were having that discussion. In terms of what you were mentioning about genocide, I mean, Norman Finkelstein and others have categorized, because look, there's three stages, right? There's three stages in international law. There's what you call war crimes, that's stage one. Then you above that you have what's referred to as crimes against humanity.
Isn't there collective punishment and then?
Collective punishment is a war crime.
I see.
Yeah? So it's that's stage one. And then you got stage two, which is crimes against humanity. And then stage three is genocide. Yeah. So Finkelstein, for example, he's seen as a great expert in this matter. He says that this current conflict is anywhere between crimes against humanity and genocide. The reason why, okay, look, what can we all agree upon? We can all agree upon that this is apartheid. Yeah. It's effectively consensus on the fact, on that matter. Someone will say, well, we don't accept the argument that this is genocide. I don't try and make the hardest argument to prove. I make the argument that everyone agrees upon, that it's impossible to dispute. Yeah. That's why I personally agree that it's a genocide. I agree that. But for me to prove that, the argumentative burden is heavier. Yeah. I think when we're making the argument, we should have an argument which everyone agrees upon. So in this case, there's two things to leverage the situation, just to answer your question, on an applicable level. Because the laws that are enshrined in Israel are 100% racist, according to all definitions, the international definitions, Bet Salem, Amnesty International, whatever you like. And they're logically racist. I mean, you're favoring European Jews or Jews from other place over other people. Someone will say, okay, well, actually, but you have Ethiopian Jews, you have Sephardic Jews, so how could it be racist based on color of skin? Mm-hmm. The way that the Convention 1973 defines race is not the color of your skin, it's by nationhood. And still, so if we accept that that's the definition of race, then even if you discriminate of a Sudanese guy that's Muslim versus a Sudanese or an Ethiopian guy they're both the same color, but he's a Jew, and you discriminate that one over that one, that would be seen as racism. According to their definitions of race, did you get it? Because they could say, well, they're both the same color. We've got black Jews, that could be the counter argument. So we're just assessing that. Mm-hmm. So if we can make the argument with vehemency that actually this is racism by everyone's definition, and if you support it unequivocally, then you're supporting racism. And therefore, you're implicit in racism, or maybe that would make you a racist. Because the question is, does supporting racism make you a racist? The reason why I bring race to the fore here is because you've got to look at people's insecurities, okay? I know this is going to sound very Machiavellian, but at this point we need to know what to do, right? Because we cannot expect compassion is going to get us anywhere. Yeah. The major insecurity of institutions in the West, of people in the West, people that are trying to pressure Muslims to toe the party line, not speak about, not even wave the Palestinian flag. One of the worst things to be labeled in the West is being a racist. So use labels and stigma. You and I both know, do you want to be called a terrorist or an anti-Semite? We don't like that. Okay, maybe I care about it less because I've been stung with these kind of things. But for the average Muslim person, they don't want to. So just like you care about your own reputation. Believe me, they care about their own reputation as well. So we have to identify, A, those people who are visible on the online space, who are supporting the state of Israel, corner them if you can, and showing them that, by showing them the evidence, do you agree with this racism or not? Justin Trudeau would be a perfect person. He's race inclusive. Go to him and say, do you agree with apartheid? Because is this apartheid? He'll be jammed. And then accuse him of racism. Put the label of racism, you're a racist because you believe that these people, you support a state which discriminates on the basis of race. You're the same as anyone who would have supported South Africa. You're that. So once you put that and you leverage that and you stigmatize the population or people, you'll see that they will not push back. You'll shut them up. Yeah. Because they're using Hamas, terrorism, this, that to try and shut us up. Okay, we'll play the same game.
Yeah.
Let's play, let's let the games begin. So racism is the first thing. Because they don't care if, there's no term that describes a person who supports effectively crimes against humanity.
Yeah.
You can say you're a sadistic person, you're a psychopath. There's not, like you can't say you're a terrorist. Yeah. And this is the power dynamic, it's an unfortunate one. If we say to a white man, you're a terrorist, it's not acceptable in the major society. Yeah. But if you say to a white man, you're a racist, do you see? If you say to, and you know best, I mean, if you say to a white, trust me, that is something they will take seriously. Yeah. Believe me. Saying to a white man who supports Israel that you're a racist is as effective to him in damaging his reputation as him saying to us you're a terrorist.
Wow.
Do you understand? So if we bring racism now, this is the thing, we're going to label you. And that's why we want to start an initiative. We're in the background doing it already. Yesterday we spoke about it. Where we're going to get people to put in these institutions that are attacking Muslims because of their pro-Palestinian support, and we're going to name and shame them. Maybe you can get involved in that as well,
Inshallah,
on Twitter and other places. But they have to provide evidence. We'll put their face and say this is the racist such and such. It'll be on the social media for everyone. Yeah. Naming and shaming and stigmatizing and attacking, because this is not a matter of okay, let's just make the argument. This is a mundane, abstract thing. No, this argument is going to end in the following way. It's going to have an implication in your life. If you don't agree with me, and you agree with the state of Israel and its apartheid system, then you're racist.
That's an amazing point. That is an amazing point, because that's what they've been using, like not just against us, but against the prophets in the Quran. Every single time a prophet goes to his people, they're like, "You're a liar," who say they're magician. All these terms, so people don't have to listen to them. So it's a very good point.
Yeah.
I'll balance that out with something that Dr. Ovamir was mentioning earlier, which is also something that Sami Hamdi has been mentioning of late, which is when it comes to, I completely agree with that, with those tactics, especially for the ru'us shayateen, right, the people who are at the head. But if you're talking about maybe some average people that are less sort of committed and wanting to know, I do think that there's utility. I think that it's useful sometimes to portray it as an issue of truth versus falsehood and justice versus injustice. I think for people on the fence, for us Muslims among ourselves, we're talking to us, the sort of civilizational discourse is very empowering, and it's very good, honestly, because we need to be united and we need to feel that. When we're talking to another audience, someone who is able to be convinced, is not maybe fully committed, then I think there's room for portraying it as something that is ready to welcome them as well. Right, that this is something that you actually can redeem yourself if you're feeling guilty about racism, because many people in the Western world feel very guilty about it. This is how you redeem yourself. And I've used, I noticed you tweeted the thing about the land, what does they call it, land acknowledgements. This is something that I've been hammering people with, right? It's like, you want to make land acknowledgements, there's a land seizure going on right now, you have the opportunity to stop it. Yeah. What are you going to do? Or hold people to the principles that they at least demonstrate, claim to show. So there needs to be that olive branch of redemption. Yes, you're going to have to work for it, but it's time to redeem yourself. You have this history, you have this past, you feel guilty about it. Now's the time to put your money where your mouth is. If you really feel guilty about it, hop on the train.
That is an amazing point, because then it ties us, fighting for the basic human rights with the dawah, bringing people to Islam, and being able to show, listen, Islam is superior for X, Y, Z reasons. Come join the
because that's something we actually sympathize more with the left than the right on. The right don't make an issue of. The right are actually more anti-immigration for the most part. Right. Yeah. They don't celebrate different cultures and different races as much as the left have at least attempted to portray themselves as doing so. Yeah. So they want to, if the left want to prove their inclusivity credentials and diverse credentials, now it's the perfect time, as Tom said.
But both of the points that both of you made, actually address the left.
That's right.
And you could say the centrist establishment, but it doesn't quite address the right.
Yeah.
How do you address right-wingers?
I think the racism point does address the right.
It's actually more, it does.
They don't like being seen. He's right to say that right wingers are less like phased by it,
Yeah.
especially if you're on the far right. Some of them are flagrant about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
The right, I mean, the thing is with the right is, I think, direct challenge, because a lot of them are just open supporters of Israel,
Yeah.
right? What we're doing already with the right, I mean, effectively what we're doing is what we're doing with the right. So Jordan Peterson, for example, now he's been paid, or I don't, by Daily Wire.
Yeah.
I'm not saying before any defamation things come into play that he's being paid for this particular thing, but I'm saying he's being paid by Daily Wire. That's a fact, and Daily Wire is sympathetic to Israel. That's a fact as well.
Yeah.
People like him, to target him and to actually show him that if you decide to go down that route, because the thing is, the leverage that we have with the right, especially social media figures or politicians or whatever it is actually our support for them, especially as of late. There's been a lot of support. Jordan Peterson recognized that. For example, Daily Wire recognized that. There's a lot of people that watch their stuff, that are Muslim people. They don't realize how much it is. Yeah. There was another show called Valuetainment, PBD.
Yeah.
You know, where all of these are effectively right-wing conservatives, right? Stephen Crowder, right-wing conservatives, people watching from our side. Matt Walsh, right-wing conservatives, people watching from our side. And so when they start seeing, wait a minute, there's 20% of our following effectively is Muslim following, and they're objecting to this, that's the leverage that we have with them, because now they're starting to see resistance, and no one likes that.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you, they don't like to see those negative comments. They don't like to see the unsubscribes and the unfollows and the negative comments and so on and so forth. So for them to lose that much of their base, effectively, because we're watching their material, for us to boycott them and not watch them, is a big blow to them, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
Two additional tactics that I've found useful.
Sure.
You know, you collect sort of dissenters from each side, right? So there are dissenters on the right. Candace Owens, for example, last week tweeted, "I don't understand why we're sending troops and money to for a foreign nation to protect their borders."
That's the point.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then she
Not
flipped
America
it.
first.
And then she flipped it. Exactly. So there's an America first sort of, sub-movement within the right that can totally be exploited, and I tried it with...
Yeah, and I tweeted Candace Owens, and I told her, well done for not towing the party line on this.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I believe she also paid by the Daily Wire, is that correct? Or
I don't think
Tucker
so.
Carlson has done the same thing.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Tucker
He's
Carlson,
making
yes.
the same point.
So there are fissures, right? And you have to pay attention, and you have to scoop them up and kind of both use their discourse and also see who's more amenable than others. There's also, if you look within the last 10 years, what have the right sort of been known for, both anti-vaxxing and sort of how their response to COVID. They're very sensitive to taxation. They're very sensitive to the feeling like their money is being ill spent.
Yes, this is a very good point.
I hammer them on that. So in the United States, we spend more tax, 4 times as much propping up the Israeli military than we do on food stamps, right? So it's like, and it's an enormous amount of money, right? Republicans that care about that stuff, you're going to hit a nerve with that.
Excellent. I think that is brilliant, because actually that's the winning argument. With the Republicans and the Conservatives, because a lot of them are thinking, sorry to say, we don't, like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump himself came out and said, I don't agree with these kinds of forays and these wars outside, because this is America and America comes first. Why should we get involved in all this? So to play on the tax point, I mean, one of the major differences between left and right wing in the political spectrum is the issue of taxation. So your money is being spent on this. Your money is being spent on killing children. Is that what you want? I mean, is that what you want your money to be spent on? Do you know what I mean? So the taxation point, the argument there is phenomenal. It's fantastic.
There's a further discursive point that just occurred to me now, is that people on the right, very much in America at least, have this pull yourself up by your bootstraps, radical sort of independence thing. We can very easily portray Israel as prodigal son, right? Just mooching off of all this money, this largesse, and then look at the results. And that's what I actually challenged some conservative talk show hosts on in our neck of the woods. I said, what's the ROI on this investment? Right? It's like, if Israel is an investment, what exactly is the United States getting off?
Beautiful. I think that's the winning argument. If you go in, in practically speaking, if someone goes in the comment section and say, why should our country, America, go into a war like this? I'm going to start seeing a lot of likes, retweets of that, even if the person is Muslim. But let's say they got an English name or American name, Tom or something, and they say that this guy's with us. Why should we put? Do you know what I mean? Practically speaking, this is the argument that will work with them, because that's what they care about.
Yeah, they
I think
hate,
it's
they hate
phenomenal.
to feel like anyone's getting a free ride.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you portray Israel as this very irresponsible, can't do anything for themselves, relies on the United States to prop them up, that's very, very damaging.
Excellent
discursive.
point. Excellent
Amazing,
point.
amazing points. May Allah say, Allah say, Sheikh Usta, I want to ask you as well, what are some things Muslims can do to better the situation?
I mean, our focus for the last few years has been really on I personally believe, the missing piece. Like, we need unity. Unity is basically the solution, but it's theoretical. How do you get to unity? You need to remove the barriers. What's the biggest barrier to unity? The biggest barrier for unity is really sectarianism.
Yeah.
So we've been really putting lots of effort to spread, non-sectarian views and anti-sectarian views, really. But the most important thing is really the concept that organized work is very important. At the end of the day, a person unfortunately sometimes doesn't notice, a fish doesn't feel its sweat, right, in the water.
Mm.
So we are raised, and all of us basically, Tom is born and raised here. You're born and raised in the UK. I'm raised here, and also Dr. Ovamir basically came very young, and yourself the same. So individualism is there, right? And sometimes when we feel basically individual endeavors can either benefit the self or benefit the community, benefit the community specifically, benefit the community, we feel this is the ultimate way.
Yeah.
And everybody has, their small projects. I believe if somebody wants to build a house, you could do it on your own, maybe with a couple of brothers, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to build a high-rise, if you want to build something huge, if you want to build the Golden Gate Bridge, it's going to take a community work of an organized human. Like every beehive, right, is an amazing social organization. And I was, to be honest, surprised, I'm not a biologist, that some of these beehives have up to 80,000 bees in it.
Yeah.
Every single bee has a specific task. There's a queen bee, there's a blah blah bee, drone bees, and this bees and that bee. If we're not going to be able to collectively create these organized human construct, human collections that are organized, this is the most important word really for me, is organized.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? As an engineer, basically, I formulate, many engineers that put them together. There's people who focus on the development, people focus on the quality assurance, people focus on the DevOps and the operation. Every single engineer has a specific task. Even within those three buckets, let's say,
Yeah.
there's specialization. Some people focus on the UI, some people focus on the database, some people focus on the servers. We need to learn how to build these grand structures,
Yeah.
so we can really be able to have big projects.
Yeah.
And helping a nation of 2 billion to progress and to unite and unify, and it's not simple.
Yeah.
Forget about building a high-rise. That's just like a piece of cake, right?
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, I was in downtown Toronto. In front of us, basically, they kind of demolished a building, an old building, and they built a huge high-rise. And our building's glass, so I was always seeing it. Within 6 months, man, basically, that building became humongous. We're trying to build a nation. We're trying to revive a nation. So that's number one, is learning. And SubhanAllah, I remember something from high school here. I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, and I still remember grade 12 math. The teacher is telling us, what is the most important, characteristic that the employers want in students? And that's why he changes his styles in class. Is his teamwork. That's the most important thing. It's something that, to be honest, again, I grew up here. I feel it's missing. People can't collaborate. Two messages 2 miles from each other cannot collaborate.
Yeah.
I'm super pro collaboration.
Yeah.
So forming teams and teams collaborating at both levels. You see what I'm saying? Because not everybody has to be in one team,
Yeah.
But we need to form teams and lots of teams, and Allah orders us to form teams in the Quran.
Yeah.
وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Let it be form teams and groups that do that take the responsibility of carrying the da'wah to Islam, ad-da'wah al-khair, ad-da'wah al-Islam. And the Amr al-Ma'ruf and is activism that we're talking about. Like all the beautiful projects here, these are amazing ideas. I can't even get to these ideas. But what I'd like to basically do and help in, can we formulate teams and then collaborate between different teams to execute on these ideas?
Yeah.
You see,
That's
so that's number
point.
one. Number two, to unify any community, and we spoke about this maybe yesterday in a different podcast, is that to unify humankind, any human grouping, to unify them, you need to have an idea, that mobilizes this team. That creates a vision, a dream of how these people can basically be together and be better together on an individual and communal basis.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when we understand Islam It's just a bunch of again. Here we go again.
Secularism.
Personal, just personally. Forget maybe the word secular, which it is describes it very well, but we don't want to offend anybody. But just on a personal basis, just personal. My character, my spirituality, my development. Subhanallah. There's nothing that links us. It's just he's a Muslim, he's white. He's a Muslim, he's African. He's a Muslim, he's Indo-Pak. I'm a Muslim, I'm Arab. But what unifies us here? I love this group, by the way. It's really representative, mashallah. I love it. Yeah? But we need to have a vision. If there's no vision, if there's no dream, you can't unify people. If there's no vision, if there's no dream, if we don't understand Islam in the mission, purpose way, forget it. So what I3 has been trying to do, and that's why we built this conference today and this whole week of tours, is to reignite the mission in Islam and help people to see Islam in a non-secular way, which is why the theme is desecularizing the Muslim mind. And to help people understand, if you want big success, not small ones, it has to be a congregation, a jama'ah. Ya akhi, in Islam we pray in a jama'ah. Our siyam is in jama'ah. Our hajj and umrah in a jama'ah. Our zakah, people don't know, but it's in a jama'ah. There's people who are giving, there's people who are collecting, there's people who are distributing, there's people who are, it's a jama'ah. And these are the ibadat. Imagine basically the rest of the Islam. But we don't have that concept. It's weak.
Yeah.
I don't want to say we don't have it. Lots of people do. But overall, it is on the weak side.
Wow.
And we want to re-strengthen this to understand humongous endeavors can only be accomplished through organized human efforts. The Rasul ﷺ was the best human being ever. I mean, if somebody can do something alone, it will be the Rasul ﷺ. Nobody can debate that. The first thing he did in the first part of the seerah is one thing. Actually, the first part of the Mecca seerah just has one objective: build the team. That's it. I mean, nothing happened in the first phase except build a team. Individual da'wah, grab people, basically structure them, congregate them, put them in halaqat, let them pray in the valleys, oversee them, oversee their spiritual development, their intellectual development, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed an ayah that says, okay, now you guys are ready as a team, let's go now interact with society so we can build the grand project, the dream that we have of building a society based upon the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which resulted in that beautiful, amazing prophetic society in Medina. And that's why the Medina became Madinatul Rasul. Became the city of the Prophet. Why? Because he built a team to accomplish the project, went through a specific step, until basically accomplished it.
Yeah.
So this is what I3 stands for. This is what we believe basically is the cure. And I believe basically we need to inspire the Ummah with those two concepts of organized human work and a mission-oriented vision of Islam.
That's an amazing point from you and from everyone. May Allah bless you all immensely. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I learned a lot. Wallah, I want to keep going, but we gotta cut it off here, unfortunately. Let's capitalize on what Sheikh Usta had mentioned, and let's, in an organized manner, share with 3 people, inshallah. You who's watching to the end, share this with 3 other people, and then they can, inshallah, share it with 3 other people, so they can all benefit from it. May Allah bless you all immensely for joining, and inshallah, we'll see you guys on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.